We value each and every one of you. We'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from right now. Let us know in the comments below. Now, let's jump into today's story. The rhythmic drumming of Ethan Park's fingers against the metallic armrest echoed through the quiet of Mercy General Hospital's exam room. Outside the window, golden autumn leaves swirled across the nearly empty parking lot, a stark contrast to the sterile white stillness inside. At 45, Ethan's rugged hands bore the scars of 2 decades in real estate development, each callous a testament to the empire he had built from the ground up. Beside him, Emily Hartwell's manicured fingers interlocked with his, her wedding band catching the harsh fluorescent light. 18 years of marriage had attuned him to every subtlety of her touch, but today, it felt different, stiff, maybe even rehearsed. "It's probably just stress," Emily said, her voice carrying an odd tension. "You've been pushing too hard on that new project." Ethan cleared his throat, fighting back a cough. "Maybe," but Chris insisted on these tests. The door clicked open softly as Dr. Chris Hampton stepped inside, his easy stride betraying none of the weight. In his expression, the manila folder in his hand seemed heavier than paper, as if it carried the weight of the world. "Ethan, Emily," Chris began, his use of their first names a reminder of their years as college friends, though his tone remained strictly professional. "I have the results." Ethan felt Emily's hand flinch slightly. Her free hand slipped into her bag, brushing against her phone. "The scans show a mass in your left lung," Chris said carefully, his words precise. "The biopsy confirms it's malignant. Stage 3 non-small cell lung cancer." The room seemed to close in as the words settled like a heavy fog. Ethan's developer mind immediately began calculating angles, solutions, a way to fix this. But this wasn't something he could solve with a blueprint. "What's the survival rate?" he asked, driven by a need for data, something concrete to hold on to. Chris sighed, leaning forward as he laid out several scan images on the small table. "With aggressive treatment, the 5-year survival rate is around 30%. But you're younger than most patients, Ethan, and in excellent overall health. That works in our favor. We have a few strong treatment options." Emily's phone buzzed quietly. She glanced at it, quickly tucking it away again. "What kind of treatment options?" Ethan pressed. Chris reached for several brochures. "We'll focus on a combined approach. Chemotherapy will be our main course, supplemented with radiation. There are also promising clinical trials we can explore." Emily's phone buzzed a second time. This time, she pushed her chair back abruptly, the legs scraping against the linoleum floor. "I just need a minute," she murmured, her voice heavy with what Ethan assumed was emotion. Her phone slipped from her hand as she rushed out of the room, landing on the chair with a soft thud. Ethan picked it up instinctively, meaning to return it to her. The screen lit up with another message notification, and his world tilted on its axis. The name on the screen was one he had known for 20 years, Ryan Keller. The preview of the message turned his blood to ice. "Babe, finally. We don't even have to speed this up. Nature's handling it for us. Once he's gone, the kids are ready to say he was cruel to them. Everything's ours." Ethan's hands trembled as he held the phone, the medical brochures scattered forgotten at his feet. He turned the screen toward Chris, whose professional composure cracked as he read the message. "Ethan," Chris whispered, quickly stepping over to close the door Emily had left ajar. "Whatever you do next, don't let them know you've seen this. Don't let them suspect anything's wrong." Ethan stared at the phone, his mind racing through decades of memories. Ryan Keller, his closest friend since college, best man at his wedding, godfather to his kids, the man who'd helped fund his first real estate project, who'd spent countless weekends at their home, who'd taught Marcus to throw his first pitch. The kids, Ethan managed, his voice hoarse. "Emma and Marcus, they're saying my children." Chris moved closer, speaking in a low, urgent voice. "Ethan, listen to me carefully. You're fighting 2 battles now, and both could cost you your life. We need to start treatment immediately, but you also need to protect yourself and your children. Do you have someone you trust? Someone neither Emily nor Ryan would suspect." Ethan's thoughts jumped to a recent project, a home renovation for a disabled veteran's son. Glenn Carrick, a retired Marine intelligence officer, had insisted on paying something despite Ethan offering to do the work at cost. During the project, they'd shared long talks, and Glenn had given him a firm handshake and a card. "If you ever need help, day or night, call me." Ethan took a shaky breath and replied, "I might. I think I have someone." He quickly forwarded the incriminating message to his email before deleting it from Emily's phone. The door creaked open, and Emily returned, her expression smoothed into an apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sorry about that." "Of course," Chris said smoothly, handing back her phone. "As I was explaining about the treatment options." Ethan sat through the rest of the consultation in a daze, nodding at the right moments, but his thoughts spiraled. Every touch of Emily's hand now felt like a venomous bite. Every concerned glance carried the weight of years of betrayal. Jonathan's warning echoed in his mind. As they left the hospital, Emily's hand rested gently on his arm. "I'll drive," she said softly. "You've had enough shocks for one day." "If you only knew," Ethan thought bitterly, following her to the car. Pulling out his phone, he pretended to check his work emails, but his fingers moved with purpose. "Need your help. Life and death. Can we meet tonight?" Glenn's reply came almost instantly. "My office. 8 p.m. Come alone." Glenn Carrick's basement office bore no resemblance to a cliché detective's hideout. It looked more like a military command center. Multiple monitors displayed security feeds. A bank of sophisticated devices hummed quietly, and the faint scent of coffee and gun oil lingered in the air. The only nod to comfort was a worn leather couch where Ethan now sat, gripping a steaming mug of black coffee. "Run it by me again," Glenn said, his close-cropped gray hair catching the blue glow of the monitors. "Every detail matters." Ethan began recounting the day's events, his voice steadying with each word. Glenn's presence had a grounding effect. Here was someone who thrived in crisis, a man who understood survival and strategy. The message mentioned poison, Glenn noted, typing quickly across one of his keyboards. "Have you experienced any unusual symptoms besides the cough?" Ethan's hand instinctively went to his throat. "The cough started about 6 months ago. Emily's been very insistent about me taking all these supplements she says will help boost my immune system." Glenn's typing stopped briefly. "We'll need samples of everything you've been taking." And Ethan, "Stop taking them immediately." "You think they actually—" Ethan trailed off. Glenn's voice was firm. "I think we assume the worst and work backward from there." He pulled up several databases on his screens. "Ryan Keller, you said? Let's see what we can dig up on your best friend." Over the next 2 weeks, while Ethan underwent his initial cancer treatments, Glenn's investigation uncovered a web of betrayal that made the original message seem almost trivial. "Take a look at this," Glenn said one evening, spreading surveillance photos and documents across his desk. "Ryan's not just having an affair with Emily. He's been systematically embezzling from your company through ghost contracts." Ethan leaned forward, his developer's eye quickly spotting the inconsistencies. "These invoices, they're for projects we never did." "Exactly," Glenn confirmed. "And that's just the tip of the iceberg." He brought up financial records on the main monitor. "They've taken out multiple life insurance policies in your name. The signatures are forgeries, but look at the dates. Every policy was purchased shortly after your first symptoms started." Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his thinning hair. The chemotherapy had already begun to wear him down, but the weight of such meticulous betrayal hit him harder than any treatment. "What about my kids?" he asked quietly, dreading the answer. Glenn's expression darkened. "That's where it gets worse. I've been monitoring their communications." He grabbed a different folder. "You need to see this, but you need to brace yourself." Inside were transcripts of messages, emails, and records of appointments with child psychologists. The manipulation of his children's memories was laid out in sickening detail. "They've been working on this for years," Glenn explained. "Subtle reinforcement of negative experiences, planting doubts, even creating false memories of things that never happened. It's called memory implantation, and they've been doing it to both Emma and Marcus." Ethan's hands shook as he read through the transcripts, the words blurring through a haze of rage. How could they do this to children? Their own children? Glenn's voice dropped further. That's the worst part. I don't think they plan to keep the kids around once they've gotten what they want. He pressed play on an audio file, and the chilling voices of Emily and Ryan filled the room. Once we get their testimony and the insurance money, we'll need to disappear. Emily's voice said. The kids will just complicate things. They're old enough to figure life out on their own, Ryan replied. And let's be honest, they'll hate us once they know what we did. It's cleaner this way. Ethan shot to his feet, pacing the length of Glenn's office, his fists clenched tightly. I need to tell them. I need to show them what's happening. Not yet, Glenn warned. We need more evidence. We need to catch them red-handed and document everything. If you move too soon, they'll deny it. And right now your kids are conditioned to believe them over you. Ethan stopped, breathing hard as the weight of the situation settled on his shoulders. Then let's get them, he said, his voice cold and steady. I don't care how long it takes. We'll get everything we need. The video footage played on Glenn's largest monitor, the high-definition image crisp and clear despite being shot through a window at Ryan's lake house. Ethan watched, his heart shattering, as Emily and Ryan sat with Emma and Marcus on the sleek leather couch Ethan hadn't even known Ryan owned. Try to remember. Emily's voice came through the directional microphone. You were 7, maybe 8. Your father had been drinking. Emma's brows furrowed in confusion. I remember being scared, but the plate, Ryan prompted gently, his hand resting on Emma's shoulder. Remember the plate he threw? Emma's eyes widened. Yes, I remember now. He was so angry. Ethan gripped the arms of his chair tightly. I never threw anything. I've never even raised my voice to them. That's the dangerous part, said Dr. Laura Kim, the child psychologist Glenn had brought in to consult. They're not just lying to your children, they're changing their memories. The human mind is far more malleable than people realize, particularly with childhood experiences. On the screen, Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I don't remember Dad throwing anything. Emily's voice stayed calm and smooth. You were younger, sweetheart. Sometimes we block out traumatic memories as a way to protect ourselves. But they're still there. That's why you get anxious when people raise their voices, remember? Marcus tugged nervously at a loose thread on his sleeve, a habit Ethan instantly recognized from when his son was troubled. I guess. But Dad's never scared me. Not really. That's the fear talking, Ryan interjected, his tone soft but insidious. It's okay, buddy. We're here to help you remember the truth. Glenn paused the footage. Marcus is their weak link. He's resisting the implanted memories, even if he doesn't realize it. If we're going to break this wide open, he's our best shot. Ethan stared at the frozen image of his children, his hands trembling slightly from the effects of his most recent chemotherapy treatment. They're stealing everything from them. Not just their father, but their real memories, their sense of what's true. We won't let that happen, Glenn said firmly, his military background surfacing in his tone. We're going to save your kids and make those two pay for every lie they've told. Dr. Kim nodded in agreement. Once we expose their manipulation, we can start therapy to help your children separate fact from fiction. But Glenn's right. We need to be careful. If we confront them too soon, it could drive Emma and Marcus deeper into Emily and Ryan's story. Ethan rose from his chair, stepping closer to the monitor. He reached out to touch the faces of his children, leaving a faint smudge on the screen. How much more do we need? He asked, his voice hoarse. Glenn's expression was resolute. We're close. My contacts at the FBI are pulling the case together for fraud, conspiracy, and more. We just need to catch them actively planning their next move. So I keep acting normal, Ethan murmured, his mind shifting into the familiar rhythms of strategy and preparation. I keep going to treatments. Let them think it's working. Glenn nodded. Ethan's jaw tightened, his builder's mind already visualizing a different kind of project. Not of concrete and steel, but of truth and justice. He would tear down the web of lies thread by thread and rebuild his family's foundation stronger than ever. Whatever it takes, he said quietly, his voice filled with the same unwavering resolve that had built his empire. Whatever it takes to save my children. Sylvia Sire's corner office overlooked the city's financial district, the floor-to-ceiling windows streaked with early morning rain. Her desk, stark and precise, bore no family photos or personal touches. only neatly organized case files and a single potted succulent. Glenn had recommended her for this reason alone. She lived for her work, and her 90% success rate proved it. Walk me through the timeline again, Sylvia said, her Mont Blanc pen poised above a legal pad. 3 full pages of notes already sat on the desk from their 2-hour meeting. When did you first notice the supplements? Ethan pulled out his phone, his fingers navigating the calendar app. The chemotherapy often left his memory hazy. Emily started with the vitamins about 8 months ago. Small white pills she said would boost my immune system. And the cough began? 2 months after that. Ethan replied, his hand unconsciously moving to his throat, a reflex since the diagnosis. She was insistent about the supplements, would stand there every morning and watch me take them. Sylvia's pen scratched across the paper. We'll need those pills analyzed. Glenn, can your lab contacts handle that discreetly? Glenn nodded from his position by the window. Already sent samples to a private lab in Virginia. Results should be in by the end of the week. Good. Sylvia flipped to a new page. Now, about the company finances. These ghost contracts Ryan created. I need every detail. Ethan spread a stack of financial documents across her desk. His developers I had spotted discrepancies others might have missed. See these material orders? The quantities don't match any of our actual projects. And here, he pointed to a cluster of invoices. These labor costs are for crews that don't even exist. How long has Ryan had access to your company's finances? Sylvia asked. Ethan's voice faltered. He helped me start the business 20 years ago. He's handled most of the accounting since then. I trusted him with everything. Sylvia's sharp expression softened just slightly. That's exactly what predators like Ryan count on. Trust is their hunting ground. She turned her computer screen toward him, pulling up a file. Look at this. Police reports from 3 different states appeared on the monitor. The name Ryan Keller was listed in each one, though with variations. Ryan K. Sellers are J. Keller, Ryan S. Keller. Same pattern every time, Sylvia explained. He targets successful business owners, typically in construction or real estate, usually through their wives. The affairs last 2 or 3 years while he systematically drains the companies. Once the money runs dry, he and the wife disappear. But the children? Ethan's fists clenched. They've never targeted the children before. That's what makes your case unique, Sylvia replied. The door opened as Dr. Laura Kim entered, a thick folder under her arm. The child psychologist's calm professionalism was betrayed only by the concern in her eyes. Dr. Kim, Sylvia said, rising to greet her. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Please call me Laura. She sat next to Ethan, placing the folder on the table. I've reviewed the video footage Glenn provided. What they're doing to your children, Laura continued, is a form of psychological abuse called memory implantation. It's akin to the methods used in cult programming. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat tight. Can it be reversed? With proper therapy, yes, Laura said carefully. But first we need to document everything. Every session they have with your kids, every fabricated story. It's all evidence of systematic abuse. Glenn's phone buzzed, breaking the tension. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. Speaking of documentation, they've scheduled another therapy session with the kids for tomorrow. Where? Sylvia asked. Ryan's lake house again, Glenn replied. They seem to prefer it for these sessions. We'll have audio and visual coverage, Laura assured, her tone steady but her eyes cold with anger. Every lie they tell those kids is another nail in their legal coffin. Ethan pushed himself to his feet, steadying against the edge of Sylvia's desk as a wave of nausea hit him from the chemotherapy. We're running out of time, he said, his voice low but determined. I won't let them steal my kids' lives. Not another day. The latest round of treatment had been particularly brutal, but Ethan forced himself to focus. What's our next step? Sylvia gathered the documents into neat, organized piles. We build an airtight case. Every financial transaction, every forged document, every manipulative session with the children, we document everything. Glenn's surveillance provides the hard evidence. Laura gives expert testimony on the psychological abuse, and I'll ensure it holds up in court. Ethan's voice was heavy with worry as he asked, and the kids? How do we protect them while all of this plays out. We watch and wait, Laura advised. Any premature move could drive them deeper into Emily and Ryan's lies. They need to start questioning things naturally on their own. As if on cue, Glenn's phone buzzed, drawing his attention. His eyebrows lifted slightly as he read the message. That might happen sooner than we thought. Marcus just texted Emily asking if he can visit you at the hospital tomorrow. Ethan's heart jumped in his chest. He hasn't visited me since the diagnosis. This could be significant, Laura cautioned. But remember, no accusations, no confrontation. Just listen. Let Marcus come to his own conclusions. The soft afternoon light filtered through the hospital window, casting long shadows across Ethan's bed. The steady drip of the chemotherapy marked the passing time like a metronome. He deliberately timed this session, wanting Marcus to see the reality of his condition. Not for sympathy, but for truth. Marcus entered the room hesitantly, his tall teenage frame awkward as though he were trying to fold in on himself. At 15, he was nearly his father's height, but today he looked smaller, uncertain. "Hey, Dad." Marcus lingered near the door, hands buried in the pockets of his jacket. "You know I'm fighting cancer, right?" Ethan offered a faint smile. "It's okay to say it." Marcus moved closer, settling into the chair beside the bed. His gaze darted toward the 4 bags, the monitors, the physical proof of his father's fight. "Does it hurt?" Sometimes, Ethan admitted, his tone calm and factual. "The medicines they use to fight the cancer are pretty strong, but the doctors say I'm responding well." A nurse entered briefly to check his vitals, nodding with approval at the numbers before, leaving them alone again. The silence hung between father and son, heavy with things left unsaid. Finally, Marcus broke it, his voice low and uncertain. "Dad, something doesn't feel right." Ethan's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression steady. "What do you mean?" Marcus stared at his hands as he tugged at a loose thread on his sleeve, just like in the surveillance video. "Last week, I heard Mom and Ryan arguing. They didn't know I was home. I'd forgotten my baseball glove and came back early from practice." He hesitated, then continued quietly. "Ryan said something about sticking to the story, and Mom said they couldn't risk the kids finding out the truth." Ethan's grip on the hospital blanket tightened, but he forced himself to relax, his voice calm. "That must have been confusing to hear." Marcus looked up, his eyes full of doubt and something close to fear. "And those memories they keep talking about, the plate you supposedly threw? I keep trying to remember it, but it feels wrong. Like I'm trying to remember a movie I never saw." Years of building and construction had taught Ethan that a strong foundation was everything. You couldn't build something lasting on unstable ground. He chose his words carefully. "Marcus, what do you remember about your childhood? Not what anyone told you to remember. What do you actually remember?" Marcus frowned, his brow furrowed in deep thought. "I remember you teaching me how to use tools in your workshop. You were always super careful about safety, making sure I understood everything before I even touched anything. And when I'd get frustrated because I couldn't do something right, you never yelled. You'd just say, 'Measure twice, cut once, and we'll finish together.' Those are real memories, aren't they?" Marcus asked, his voice cracking. "Not like the other stuff." Ethan reached for his son's hand, relief flooding him when Marcus didn't pull away. "I have never, and would never, hurt you or your sister. Every memory of love, of patience, of teaching and learning together, those are real." Marcus's shoulders began to shake. "They've been lying to us? Mom and Ryan? They've been making us believe things that never happened?" "I think," Ethan said carefully, "it's time you saw something." He nodded toward the corner of the room, where Glenn had been sitting silently, almost invisible in the shadows. Glenn opened his laptop and pulled up one of the recorded therapy sessions. Marcus watched, his face draining of color as he saw himself and Emma being coached. Watched the methodical way Emily and Ryan planted suggestions, twisted memories, and created fear where none had existed. "Oh God!" Marcus choked out. "Emma, they're still doing this to Emma." "We're going to stop them," Ethan promised. "But we need your help." Glenn moved forward, his military precision evident in every motion. "Marcus, what we're about to ask you is difficult and dangerous. You'll need to act like everything's normal while helping us gather evidence. Can you do that? Marcus wiped his eyes and straightened, his posture shifting into something older, more resolute. In that moment, he looked less like a confused 15-year-old and more like the man he was becoming. What do you need me to do? Glenn's basement command center hummed with focused energy. New monitors had been added, each tracking a different aspect of their operation. One showed a live feed from Ryan's lake house, another traced financial transfers across multiple offshore accounts, and a third displayed a meticulous timeline of events. Your cancer's taken a turn for the worse, Glenn explained, gesturing to a newly doctored medical report. According to this, the treatments aren't working. The prognosis is 3 months, maybe less. Ethan examined the report. They'll want to confirm this. Already handled, Sylvia said, leaning back from a monitor. She'd been working tirelessly out of Glenn's office for the past week. I have a contact in hospital records. The information's in the system if they check. They're checking, Marcus confirmed, eyes fixed on one of the screens. He'd proven remarkably skilled at surveillance, combining Glenn's training with his natural comfort with technology. Mom just logged into the hospital portal from her phone. The wait was unbearable. Ethan forced himself to breathe slowly, ignoring the nausea from his latest treatment and focusing only on the task at hand. Finally, Marcus's phone buzzed. She's calling Ryan, he reported, switching to speaker. Tracy's voice crackled into the room. Did you see it? The new prognosis. I saw it, Ryan replied, his voice carrying an undercurrent of excitement poorly disguised as concern. We need to move faster. How are the offshore accounts? Almost ready, Tracy said. But Ryan, the kids, stick to the plan, Tracy, Ryan snapped. Once we have the insurance money and the company assets, we'll be set for life. The kids would only complicate things. Marcus's fists clenched, his face tight with restrained fury, but he stayed composed, just as Glenn had trained him. Ethan looked at his son with a surge of pride, tempered by anger. Marcus was stronger than either Ryan or Emily had ever imagined. Over the next week, they watched as Emily and Ryan accelerated their plans. Company assets disappeared, routed through a tangled network of shell corporations. Insurance paperwork was finalized. New accounts popped up in banks known for their secrecy and discretion. They're getting sloppy, Sylvia observed, reviewing the latest financial records. In their hurry, they're starting to make mistakes. Good, Glenn said firmly. He turned to Ethan. It's time to bring in my FBI contacts. We have everything: financial fraud, psychological abuse, conspiracy. They'll want to move fast. Ethan nodded and looked to Marcus. Are you ready for what comes next? Once the FBI gets involved, there's no turning back. Marcus glanced at a monitor showing Emma in her room, bent over her homework, unaware of the storm about to break. I'm ready, he said firmly. Emma deserves to know the truth. And he swallowed hard, his voice steadying. Mom and Ryan need to pay for what they've done. Glenn made the call. Within hours, his basement office was crowded with federal agents, each tasked with a specific part of the operation. They worked with silent efficiency, cataloging transactions, analyzing recordings, and solidifying their case. We'll need your sister's testimony eventually, one agent said gently to Marcus, but not until she's ready. Dr. Kim will help with that. The pieces were falling into place. Emily and Ryan's meticulously crafted web of lies was on the verge of collapse, but Ethan felt no satisfaction. Only a deep sadness for his children and what they had been put through. Dad, Marcus's voice broke into his thoughts. What happens after? When this is all over? Ethan pulled his son close, his heart aching as he realized how long it had been since he'd offered this kind of comfort. We rebuild together. Every memory they stole, every lie they told, we replace it with the truth. And this time, we build on solid ground. The monitors hummed quietly, recording every move Emily and Ryan made, every conversation, every act meant to destroy a family for profit. But they had underestimated the strength of true family. Bonds, the endurance of truth, and the unyielding determination of a father's love. The endgame was near, and this time, Ethan held all the cards. The waiting room of the Family Therapy Center smelled faintly of artificial lavender, and broken promises. Emily sat stiffly on a beige couch, her manicured nails tapping rhythmically against her designer purse. Ryan stood confidently by the window, his arrogance written in every line of his stance. Neither noticed the slight bulge beneath the receptionist's desk, where surveillance equipment had been carefully hidden the night before. Emma sat perched on the edge of her chair, dark circles under her eyes betraying sleepless nights. Marcus sat beside her, his hand occasionally brushing the recording device Glenn had slipped into his jacket pocket. The small weight felt like armor. "Remember what we practiced?" Emily whispered to Emma, her voice carrying easily to the hidden microphones. Dr. Patterson needs to hear about the incidents clearly. What Emily didn't know was that Dr. Patterson had called in sick that morning. In his place, Dr. Laura Kim sat in the consultation room, reviewing the final pieces of evidence with Ethan and a team of FBI agents. "They're all here," the receptionist's voice confirmed softly through her earpiece. Laura nodded at Ethan. "Are you ready?" Ethan adjusted his shirt collar, carefully hiding the medical port underneath. The latest round of chemotherapy had left him weaker than ever, but determination burned fiercely in his eyes. "I've been ready since the day I saw that message on Emily's phone." The receptionist's voice broke the quiet of the waiting room. "The doctor will see you now." Emily stood, smoothing her skirt. "Come on, kids. Honesty is important." Marcus took Emma's hand as they walked toward the consultation room, squeezing lightly. Emma squeezed back, though confusion flickered across her face as she felt how clammy his palm was. The door to the consultation room opened to reveal not the familiar figure of Dr. Patterson, but an assembled group of law enforcement officials, representatives from Child Protective Services, and Dr. Laura Kim. Ethan sat calmly in a chair near a large screen mounted on the wall, with Glenn standing beside him like a watchful sentinel. "What is this?" Emily's carefully curated composure cracked, her voice sharp with unease. "Where's Dr. Patterson?" "Please, everyone take a seat," Laura said, her professional tone leaving no room for argument. "We have some recordings to review." Ryan stepped toward the door instinctively, but an FBI agent moved into his path. "This is a closed session, Mr. Keller." The screen flickered to life. The first video showed Emily and Ryan at the lake house, coaching Emma through her memories of supposed abuse. Emma's face paled as she watched herself on the screen, manipulated by the very people she trusted. The subtle suggestions, the twisting of recollections. Everything was there in high definition. "That's not." Emma's voice trembled. "You said those were therapy sessions." "Keep watching," Marcus whispered quietly. The next clip began, showing Emily and Ryan alone, believing themselves in private. "Once we get the insurance money and the testimony, we disappear." Ryan's voice filled the room, cold and calculated. "The kids would only complicate things. They're old enough to figure things out on their own." "But what if they try to find us?" Emily asked. "They won't," Ryan replied confidently. "Not after we're done making them believe their father was a monster. Besides, who's going to believe them over all this documented abuse?" The room fell silent except for the hum of the monitor. Emma turned to her mother, her wide eyes pleading for denial, for an explanation, anything to make it untrue. Emily said nothing, but Emily's face had hardened into a mask of cold calculation. "You were going to abandon us?" Emma's voice cracked. "Everything you told me about Dad, it was all lies?" "Emma, honey, you don't understand." Emily reached for her daughter, but Emma recoiled violently. "Don't touch me." The teenager's legs buckled, and she would have fallen if Ethan hadn't stepped forward to catch her. "Daddy, I'm so sorry," Emma sobbed, years of false fears and twisted memories breaking apart under the weight of undeniable truth. "They made me believe." Ethan held his daughter tightly, his voice soft as she cried. Marcus moved to stand beside them, forming a protective wall around his sister. Ryan made another move toward the door, but Glenn stepped directly into his path. "Going somewhere? We haven't even gotten to the financial evidence yet." Dr. Laura Kim gestured to the FBI agents waiting in the room. "I believe you have some questions for Mr. Keller and Ms. Hartwell." As the agents began reading their rights, Emma clung to Ethan, her tears soaking into his shirt. "How can I trust any of my memories? Now, how do I know what's real?" We'll figure it out together, Ethan promised, his voice steady as he stroked her hair. That's what family is, standing together through the hard times, rebuilding, and helping each other heal. For the first time, Emily's mask cracked as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Emma, Marcus, please. You have to understand, I was trying to protect you. From what? Marcus's voice was sharp, scornful, carrying all the weight of his 15 years. From a father who taught me how to build things, who came to every game, who never once raised his voice, let alone his hand. Emma turned her tear-streaked face toward her mother, her voice quiet but firm. The only monsters here are you and Ryan. The courthouse hallway echoed with footsteps and hushed conversations. Ethan sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom C, his children flanking him like honor guards. The chemotherapy had taken his hair, but not his dignity. If anything, his gaunt appearance only served to emphasize the contrast between reality and Emily's fabricated accusations. Sylvia approached, her trial notes tucked into her signature leather briefcase. The jury's coming back. Ethan looked up, his expression calm but tense. That was fast. 4 hours of deliberation, Sylvia said, a satisfied smile tugging at her lips. In a case this complex? That's very good. It means the evidence was overwhelming. They returned to the courtroom, where Emily and Ryan sat at separate tables with their attorneys. 3 months in county jail had stripped them of their polished exteriors. The jury filed in, avoiding eye contact with the defendants. The forewoman handed the verdict forms to the bailiff, who passed them to Judge Lisa Wheeler. The judge's face was unreadable as she reviewed the forms. Will the defendants please rise? Emily stood shakily, her orange jumpsuit worlds away from her designer wardrobe. Ryan's usual confidence had shattered, replaced by visible desperation. On the count of conspiracy to commit fraud, how do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. On the count of attempted grand larceny? Guilty, Your Honor. The pronouncements continued. Guilty of child psychological abuse, guilty of embezzlement, guilty on all counts. With each word, Emma gripped Ethan's hand tighter, while Marcus sat straight-backed, his expression unyielding. Judge Wheeler set the verdict forms aside and looked directly at Emily and Ryan. Before I proceed with sentencing, I want to address something specific about this case. In my 30 years on the bench, I've seen financial crimes, fraud, embezzlement, theft. But what you two attempted goes far beyond stealing money. You tried to steal a father's place in his children's lives. You sought to destroy their reality, their ability to trust their own memories and experiences. That is an unforgivable crime. Her gaze hardened. Mr. Keller, given your prior history of similar schemes in 3 other states, I sentence you to 25 years in state prison. Ms. Hartwell, you're sentenced to 15 years. These sentences will be served consecutively, not concurrently. There will be no possibility for early release. Emily crumpled into her chair, while Ryan's facade finally shattered as the bailiffs approached to take them away. Emma! Marcus! Emily called out, desperation thick in her voice. Please, don't let it end like this. But her children had already turned away, walking beside their father out of the courtroom. In the hallway, Glenn and Laura were waiting. It's over, Glenn said simply. No, Laura corrected gently. Now the real work begins, healing, rebuilding trust, and replacing the manufactured memories with real ones. Ethan hugged his children close, his voice low but steady. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we'll do it together. 6 months after the trial, Ethan stood in the cancer ward at Mercy General Hospital, his hand hovering over the brass bell patients rang to mark the end of their treatment. The latest scans had confirmed what his body had already begun to tell him. The cancer was in remission. Ring it, Dad, Marcus said, his voice full of pride. Emma stood beside him, her hand resting on Ethan's arm. Ethan smiled softly, then reached out and rang the bell, the sound echoing through the ward like a promise of hope. Marcus called from where he stood with Emma, both teenagers beaming with pride. Ethan gripped the bell's rope, and its clear tone echoed through the ward. Medical staff appeared from nearby rooms, clapping and smiling. Many of them had stood by him through the darkest days of his treatment. Dr. Chris Hampton emerged from the crowd, carefully pulling Ethan into a hug. When you first came in with that cough, I never imagined we'd be fighting two battles at once. Three battles, Emma corrected softly, joining the embrace. The cancer, their betrayal, and our own minds. She'd been working with Dr. Laura Kim twice a week, gradually untangling the web of false memories from her real ones. Speaking of minds, Laura said, walking over with a stack of journals balanced on her arm. I have your new writing prompts ready. Marcus, yours focuses on early baseball memories. Emma, we'll work on those art class recollections you brought up last session. The teenagers took their journals without complaint. The writing exercises had become a key part of their therapy, helping them strengthen real memories while processing the manufactured ones. Glenn's waiting at the house, Marcus reminded them. He's grilling steaks to celebrate. The drive home took them past their old neighborhood, but Ethan felt nothing as they passed the house he'd once shared with Emily. Instead, he turned toward their new home, built in a development he had designed himself, with Emma and Marcus offering input at every step. Glenn stood by the grill on their back deck, the savory smell of perfectly cooked steaks filling the air. The retired Marine had become such a constant in their lives that neighbors assumed he was family. Perfect timing, he called out, flipping a steak. The potatoes you prepped are ready for the oven. As they gathered around the outdoor table, Ethan took a moment to really watch his children. Emma no longer flinched at sudden sounds, and Marcus had stopped compulsively checking his phone for messages from his mother. They were healing, all of them, in their own ways. I've been thinking, Emma said, nudging her vegetables with her fork. I want to go back to the community center. Maybe volunteer with the art program again. Ethan knew the weight of this choice. The community center had been where Emily first began planting false memories about his behavior during Emma's art classes. Returning wasn't just volunteer work. It was reclaiming her space and her truth. I'll go with you, Marcus offered. They probably need help with the Little League program anyway. Laura nodded approvingly. That's excellent progress. Remember what we talked about, replacing negative associations with new, positive experiences. Glenn raised his glass, his voice steady. To new experiences, then, and to family, the real kind, built on truth and trust. And to Dad, Emma added, her eyes glistening with emotion, for fighting for us, even when we didn't know we needed saving. Later that evening, Ethan stood by his bedroom window, watching Marcus and Emma shoot hoops in the driveway. Their laughter floated up through the twilight, light and unburdened. The shadows that had once loomed over them had finally lifted, replaced by a warm, unshakable bond. On his dresser sat 3 items: the brass bell from the cancer ward, a photo of their family taken outside the courthouse after the verdict, and a small construction level. The level, Ethan decided, would be their new family symbol, a reminder that with the right foundation and careful effort, anything could be built straight and true. Even a shattered family could be rebuilt, one authentic memory at a time. Epilogue 10 years later. The crisp autumn breeze carried the faint scent of fresh coffee from Ethan Park's new workshop, a sprawling building behind his rebuilt company headquarters. At 55, his silver hair shone proudly, matching the distinguished lines etched around his eyes. The past decade had left its marks, but they were signs of survival, badges, not scars. Dad, the Mitchell project designs are ready for review, Emma's voice called from the office. At 27, she had followed in his footsteps, earning her architecture degree and becoming a rising star at Park Developments. Her designs had already won awards for sustainable innovation, bringing a fresh perspective to the business. Ethan smiled, reflecting on how far they had come. The same hands that once trembled holding Emily's phone now guided their family and company toward brighter horizons. Park Developments had not only recovered from Ryan's embezzlement, but had flourished under Marcus's steady leadership of the finances, bolstered by his MBA. The family, like the buildings they now constructed, stood tall and strong, built on a foundation of truth, trust, and resilience. Marcus called from where he stood with Emma, both teenagers now young adults beaming with pride. Ethan gripped the bell's rope, and its clear tone rang through the ward. Medical staff appeared from nearby rooms, applauding warmly. Many of them had seen him through the darkest days of his treatment. Dr. Chris Hampton stepped forward, carefully pulling Ethan into a brief hug. When you first came in with that cough, I never imagined we'd be fighting two battles at once. Three battles, Emma corrected softly, joining the embrace. The cancer, their betrayal, and our own minds. She'd been working with Dr. Laura Kim twice a week, untangling the false memories that had once shaped her world. Speaking of minds, Laura said, entering. With a stack of journals under her arm, I have your new writing prompts ready. Marcus, yours focuses on early baseball memories. Emma, we'll dig deeper into those art class recollections you brought up. The journals had become a key part of their recovery. Tools to strengthen authentic memories while processing the ones that had been manipulated. Glenn's waiting at the house, Marcus reminded them. He's grilling steaks to celebrate. The drive home took them past their old neighborhood, but Ethan felt no connection to the house he had once shared with Emily. Instead, he turned toward the new development, a house he designed from the ground up with Emma and Marcus's input. Glenn stood at the grill on their back deck, the aroma of perfectly cooked steaks filling the air. The retired Marine, now fully gray but still sharp as ever, had become more than a friend. He was family. Perfect timing, Glenn called, flipping a steak. Those potatoes you prepped are ready to hit the oven. As they settled around the table outside, Ethan took a quiet moment to watch his children. Emma no longer flinched at sudden sounds, and Marcus had stopped compulsively checking his phone for messages that would never come. They were healing, each of them in their own way. I've been thinking, Emma said, nudging her vegetables with her fork. I want to go back to the community center. Maybe volunteer with the art program again. Ethan knew the weight of her words. The community center had been where Emily first planted false memories about his behavior during Emma's art classes. Returning wasn't just about volunteering. It was reclaiming her space and her truth. I'll go too, Marcus offered. They probably need help with the Little League program. Laura nodded approvingly. That's excellent progress. Replacing negative associations with new, positive experiences. It's exactly what we've worked toward. Glenn raised his glass, his voice steady. To new beginnings. To family. The real kind, built on truth and trust. And to Dad, Emma added, her eyes glistening with emotion. For fighting for us, even when we didn't know we needed saving. That evening, Ethan stood at his bedroom window, watching Marcus and Emma shoot hoops in the driveway. Their laughter floated up through the evening air, light, real, and unburdened. On his dresser, 3 objects stood in a row: the brass bell from the cancer ward, a photo of their family taken outside, the courthouse after the verdict, and a small construction level. Ethan smiled softly. The level, he decided, would become their family's symbol. A reminder that with a strong foundation and careful work, anything could be built straight and true. Epilogue 10 years later. The crisp autumn air carried the faint scent of coffee from Ethan Park's new workshop, a sprawling building behind his rebuilt company headquarters. At 55, his silver hair shone in the sunlight, the distinguished lines around his eyes a testament to years of survival and growth. Dad, the Mitchell project designs are ready for review, Emma's voice called from the office. At 27, she'd followed in his footsteps, earning her architectural degree and carving a name for herself in sustainable design. Her work had already earned awards, breathing fresh innovation into park developments. Ethan smiled, reflecting on how far they had come. The same hands that once shook while holding Emily's phone now guided the family business forward. Park developments had not only recovered from Ryan's theft, but had thrived, with Marcus handling the finances after completing his MBA. No contract gets signed now without at least 2 sets of eyes, Marcus had once said. It was a lesson learned at too high a price, but had shaped a better future. Glenn Massey, now fully gray but no less sharp, still ran his security firm out of the building's east wing. His marriage to Dr. Laura Kim 3 years prior had solidified their growing family. Together, they'd turned tragedy into resilience. Marcus entered carrying 2 cups of fresh coffee. Just got the quarterly update from the Victim Restitution Fund, he said. Two more of Ryan's previous victims have been fully compensated. The program had been Marcus's initiative, his way of transforming their family's pain into something meaningful. Glenn followed him in, tablet under his arm. Any word from the parole board? Ethan shook his head. Emily's third appeal was denied. The abuse charges sealed that outcome. The room fell quiet for a moment, the familiar weight of the past lingering, before Glenn shifted the conversation. Let's see those new designs, Emma. That sustainable materials program of yours is exactly what the city needs. As Emma began presenting, Ethan watched them all, his family. Glenn and Laura sat close, their shoulders touching. Marcus scribbled notes with the same focused energy he'd once shown on the baseball field. Outside the workshop windows lay the memorial garden they had built 5 years ago. Emma's idea, dedicated to victims of psychological abuse. Its paths lined with plaques offered resources and hope. Claire's therapy groups often met there, sharing their stories of betrayal and healing. That afternoon, a young woman emerged from one such session, wiping tears from her eyes. Ethan recognized her, the daughter of one of Ryan's earlier victims. Mr. Park, she called softly, spotting him through the window. I wanted to thank you. What your family did, exposing them, creating this support network, it's helping me understand what happened to my mom. Ethan welcomed her inside, introducing her to Glenn, Laura, Marcus, and Emma. As the young woman shared her story, Ethan watched his children exchange knowing glances. They saw echoes of their own journey, but also the promise of healing. You know, Glenn said later as they locked up for the day, when I first installed those cameras at Ryan's lake house, I never imagined we'd end up here, running a construction empire, hosting therapy groups, changing lives. Ethan smiled, checking the security system one last time, a habit he'd never lost. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead us to our truest path. The setting sun cast long, honest shadows through the workshop, stretching toward the garden where new flowers were always blooming. Symbols of hope, resilience, and the strength born from even the darkest moments. That evening, they gathered at Ethan's home, a tradition that had weathered every storm. Claire brought her lasagna, Glenn mixed his mojitos, virgin versions for the younger guests, and Emma's teenage daughter Sophie performed card tricks she'd learned at school. Life, rebuilt, was more beautiful than Ethan had ever imagined. Sophie, born 3 years after the trial, represented everything they had fought for. A new generation raised in authentic love and honest memories. She knew the family's history, having been told an age-appropriate version of events, but to her, it was like a story from another world. Her life was filled with Sunday dinners, family game nights, and the unwavering love of a father, an uncle Glenn, and grandparents who had come to understand the true meaning of family the hard way. As Ethan watched Sophie deal cards with the same focused expression Marcus used to wear during his baseball games, he realized this was their greatest victory. Not the prison sentences, not the recovered assets, not even their professional successes. It was this, the simple, precious ability to create real memories, untouched by manipulation or lies. Emily and Ryan had tried to destroy his family with falsehoods, but in doing so, they had taught them the immeasurable value of truth. Their betrayal had forced Ethan to fight not just for his life, but for the very soul of his family. In winning that fight, he and his children had built something unshakable, something far stronger than what they had lost. A legacy of honesty, resilience, and unconditional love that would echo for generations. The night ended as it always did, with everyone pitching in to clean up, laughing about small moments, and making plans for next week's dinner. There were no hidden agendas, no manipulations. Only the quiet truth of a family who had chosen to face life's challenges together. As the last car pulled out of the driveway, Ethan stood in the doorway, breathing in the cool night air. Somewhere in a prison cell, Emily and Ryan lived with the weight of their choices. But here, in the home they had tried to ruin, life flourished, a quiet triumph proving that the strongest foundations are built not on lies, but on the bedrock of truth and unwavering love. Ethan closed the door and set the alarm. Old habits died hard. He smiled softly as his gaze moved over the family photos lining the hallway. Each one told a story of recovery, of renewal, of love that had grown stronger after being tested by fire. The shadows of the past had long since lifted. In their place, a legacy of truth bloomed, season after season, year after year. This is where our story ends. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for spending your time here. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the video you see on the screen, and I'll see you there.